We know the New York Mets are going to be looking for bullpen help at this year's trade deadline. On today's show, I will spotlight 5 teams they should call to get some relievers in the pen.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at JustBaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Now, today's show is all about bullpen help, and the Mets maybe just acquired some. They claimed left-handed pitcher Alex Young off of waivers on Wednesday. They outrouted him to Syracuse. Young has been very good since 2022. Across 81 and two-third innings pitched at the big league level, he has had a 3.20 ERA. Now, this year, he has spent most of his time in AAA. He was with the Reds. He was then traded to the Giants in the deal that sent Austin Slater to the Reds. Had a couple appearances with the Giants in their farm system. And then now he ended up on waivers, and the Mets were able to claim him. In AAA this year, he has a 2.19 ERA, and lefties are hitting 167 against him. You might remember a couple weeks ago, the Mets claimed another lefty in Matt Gage. So they have some options here that they can try out over the next couple of weeks before the deadline. But even with that, I still think the Mets have to be very aggressive at adding bullpen help through trades and really getting dependable arms at this deadline. On yesterday's show, I went through the whole exercise of trying to find a bat that fits the Mets, and it was hard to try to find a good fit. There's just not a lot of bats out there. You could say, all right, well, go get a starting pitcher. That'll help this team. Get a frontline starter. Who's the frontline starter available? I mean, yeah, you can trade for Jack Flaherty, but he's a rental. You're going to go all the way in and get Garrett Crochet? Well, that's going to cost you an arm and a leg that the Mets are not going to spend at this deadline. While I think the Mets have crossed over to being buyers, I don't believe they're going to be aggressive buyers. I don't think that David Stearns is saying, all right, this is the team that we're going to trade Brandon Sproat for. We're going to trade the future of Brandon Sproat or future of Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams or even a Luis Angel Acuna, even a Brett Beatty. I mean, there's so many different pieces the Mets could potentially trade if they wanted to swing a big deal. But I just don't see that at this deadline. If anything, those chips should be used in the offseason to trade for next year's team. I think what you're looking at here is trying to trade from some of the depth in your farm system. Maybe that's looking at a Mike Vassell as a surplus pitcher who is getting close to the big leagues. Other teams might value him, especially if they're looking at 6 years of control on a potential back-end starter for a relief pitcher. Those are the type of deals that can get swung here. So I think the move for the Mets at this year's deadline, if you're really boiling it down, it's trying to find a couple of arms that are in the Phil Maton category, maybe a little bit better, that you can plug in, that can shore up your bullpen so that when you have a 7-1 lead, you can throw a guy in the game. Maybe it is a Maton. Maybe there's another guy like that after him who can pitch, can get out, and they don't just see the game completely flip on you, where all of a sudden you have to go to Edwin Diaz and Daniel Nunez in a game where you really should have been able to rest them. So I think it's just getting a couple solid arms in there. And yes, potentially looking at the upside plays, and we're going to go through some of them. Guys that can be lights out 8th inning guys that can set up Edwin Diaz, and potentially getting guys that have control. If the New York Mets are going to trade any significant prospects, they are going to be looking for control at this deadline. One of the very important notes to acquiring Phil Maton is that there was a club option on his contract that the Mets can pick up. So as we go through the names and the list of teams here, that's going to be an important note as we really try to find which type of relievers the Mets will go after. I'm going to do the best I can to spotlight the names that could be on the table. And for all we know, it might be someone out of left field. It is very hard to predict who the Mets are going to target, who any team's going to target when it comes to relief help. But I found 5 teams, and I wrote an article for this, or on this for Just Baseball, where I went through all the different sellers, and I found 5 teams in particular that have multiple relievers that the Mets could be in on at this deadline. I want to start with my favorite team. That's the Detroit Tigers. Here's why I love the Tigers. I think the Mets could acquire a ton of relief help without giving up significant prospect capital. So I'm going to go through the names of the relievers first. Jason Foley is the premier target that you would look at. Okay, Foley has been the closer for the Tigers this year. He throws a fastball that can touch over 100. He's typically throwing his sinker primarily, which averages at around 97 miles per hour. Throws that 60% of the time, has a slider that he mixes in a lot as well. His ground ball rate this season's at 52.8%. That's how he finds his success. I think his strikeout per 9 this year is below 7, and for his career, it's very low. He is not a strikeout pitcher. He is a ground ball pitcher that can pitch late in games, get outs for you. He's been pretty decent in the closer role, but I think he's miscast in that closer role. This is a guy that I believe is better when he's pitching more frequently, where he's not beholden to that closer's role, where on a bad Tigers team, he might not pitch for 5 days. I think that's why you're seeing numbers this year from Foley that aren't quite as sharp as what he's done in the past, where last year he had a 2.61 ERA in 69 innings pitched. He's 28 years old. He'll hit arbitration for the first time next season. So that means that you not only have Jason Foley under team control for this year, but 3 years beyond this season. That is very attractive to a team like the Mets, who hope to have a longer competitive window in other years where they would need a guy like this to set up Edwin Diaz. And I think the best part is he would sort of mirror Edwin Diaz's contract. He has saved some games, so he might be a little bit more expensive as he hits arbitration, but he's not going to make Edwin Diaz money when Diaz was in arbitration. I imagine he's going to make a couple million next year, and then it'll bump up, and maybe by the end of it, he is making, on the upper end of maybe $8 million at the end of arbitration, potentially. I had to really dive into those numbers to know for sure. But if you were to pair him with Edwin Diaz and his very big contract over the next 3 years beyond this season, you would have an 8th inning guy to pair with your closer that could be very good for you. So I really like the idea of Foley, especially with the closer experience now in his back pocket. So you could always go to him. Another option that's very similar that the Tigers have is Will Vest. Another right-handed pitcher, relies on ground balls, has a 3.27 ERA this season. And he, too, has plenty of team control. He won't be a free agent until 2028. So you have him for 25, 26, 27 beyond this year. He's not quite as good as Jason Foley, but he's still pretty damn good. Has been solid the last couple of years in the Tigers bullpen. And both of these guys, similar to Maton, are guys you can hand the ball to, just trust that they're going to hopefully throw strikes, get the ball on the ground, and get some outs for you. They're not going to completely blow you away with their stuff, although Foley can with the gas that he has. But ultimately, it's just about getting really solid relievers for Vest, fastball slider mix. I think it would be a really good fit to get either of those guys because of the control. And then in the deal, I would want the Mets to make a trade for Andrew Chafin as well. So Chafin is a left-handed reliever that I've wanted on the Mets forever. And you could package him with Vest or Foley where it really wouldn't cost much to acquire him. In fact, if you just wanted to acquire Andrew Chafin, the contract is very similar to what they just acquired with Phil Maton. Club option for next year, but a relatively expensive one, $6.5 million. And a guy that has pitched well this year, but not as well as he has in the past. He has a 3.42 ERA in his career. That's across nearly 500 innings pitched. This year it's at 3.66. Lefties are hitting 204 against him with the 531 OPS, so that's very solid. Had a terrible month of May. We had an ERA over 9, I believe. It was brutal, actually over 10. 700 runs and 6 innings pitched. But he's settled in nicely since then in June and July. Has allowed 4 earned runs and 14 2/3. Andrew Chafin as the replacement for Jake Diekman, while Foley or Vest replace Adam Ottavino. I think that makes the team significantly better. And here's where we tie yesterday's show to this one. If you throw Mark Canha in the deal as well, and his $11 million contract, which they've obviously paid throughout this season, but a prorated amount of salary for that is, I don't know, what, $4 million, something like that. The Tigers have no business contending this year at this point. Having Mark Canha's contract on the books, that just hurts them. You can lessen the prospect return by including that in this deal. And from a Mets perspective, Mark Canha is better than DJ Stewart. He's better than Ben Gamel. He's a fan favorite, absolute clubhouse favorite. He would just fit in like a glove with this team and would just give you Starling Marte insurance while limiting the prospect return. I honestly believe to get Jason Foley, Andrew Chafin, and Mark Canha, the starting point might be Mike Vassell and Kevin Parada, and then there'd probably still need to be a piece or two added in. But I think Vassell could be the best prospect in this deal. And to get two relievers and a bat in a single trade, it's sort of a C plus trade, maybe a B minus trade when you're just looking at the type of pieces you're bringing in. You're not bringing in that one A plus wow piece, although Foley could be that in a stretch. But still, you're getting dependable innings from a righty and a lefty, a righty with high leverage experience, a lefty who's been doing it for a very long time. You're getting a bat that would make some sense with this clubhouse. It's a trade that just, in my head, makes sense, where David Stearns can look at it and say, all right, this is going to help us this year. This is going to help us next year, potentially, because Chafin and Foley could be part of the 2025 bullpen. But it's not going to break the bank on the prospects. The farm system can stay relatively intact. So that's why the Tigers are my favorite team, because the Mets can use their money by absorbing Canha's contract and even Chafin's contract, the full deal to a certain extent. So I think other contenders who are pushing up against luxury tax thresholds or teams that are contenders but in small markets, they might want the Tigers to eat some of that money to be able to get a Chafin. So I think the Tigers are the team that made the most sense to me as I was exploring all these, but there's still plenty of other teams to look at. So we're going to talk about a few more next here and some relievers that are maybe a little bit better than the top end of what we're talking about from Detroit. So we'll get to that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof rack, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time, the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With the season about to resume on Friday, Game Time is your place to go to get into all the Mets games throughout the rest of this season. If you want to go to the Mets versus Marlins games, I'm going to be there on Friday night. You're going to get some great deals with Game Time. And what I do when I go to a Mets game these days, I don't buy a ticket a couple days before. I know I'm going to the game on Friday, but I don't have my ticket yet. I'm going to wait. I'm going to drive down to the ballpark. I'm going to park in the garage. I'm going to start walking down to the ballpark, and then I'm going to pull open the app. I'm going to scan for deals, find the best possible one. I can view my seat before I actually pay, so I know exactly what to expect. And there's all in pricing up front, so I'm not surprised when I get to checkout that my ticket prices just jumped a bunch because of fees. Game Time is there to make all of your ticketing needs so much easier. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get inside access to the show. I was texting the insiders about Jason Foley, Mark Canha, and Andrew Chafin as a trade idea weeks ago. So they've known that this was coming for some time. It didn't make sense to do a trade deadline show when there was great baseball going on, but the insiders get that inside access. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, another team that I had a potential mock trade sent to the insiders a while back is the Toronto Blue Jays. And the name I'm most interested in here is Chad Green. Okay, so we still don't know if the Blue Jays are going to be aggressive at the deadline, but if they are, if they're trying to sell, Chad Green is a name that I know would intrigue the Mets because Carlos Mendoza is the Mets manager, and he watched Chad Green up close and personal for years in that Yankees bullpen. And that's always a comfort knowing that a guy has experience pitching in New York. He was great for the Yankees, career 3.16 ERA. He had Tommy John surgery in 2022. So he hit free agency while he was still on the shelf and negotiated a very complicated contract with the Blue Jays, which I talked about a lot this offseason when Brendan Woodruff was in a similar boat, not Tommy John, but hurt with the shoulder injury that required surgery. And I was trying to map out what a contract would look like if the Mets were to sign him. And I used the Chad Green contract with a multiplier to try to figure out what the deal would be on Woodruff. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of Chad Green's contract, but ultimately it came down to a 2-year, $21 million club option that the Blue Jays exercised this offseason. So he's making $10.5 million a season this year and next year. So you do have that control next season, but he is expensive. So that would limit the prospect return it would take to acquire him because he does cost that much. And he's been really good this year. 2.08 ERA in 26 innings pitched. Last year it was a struggle. This year he has looked like himself. Although the strikeouts haven't quite been there, and the average exit velocity against is the highest of his career. So they are hitting him a bit harder. That is why his expected ERA is 4.48, which is more than double his actual ERA of 2.08. So that does suggest some regression could come. And with the dollar amount attached to him, it does make me a little bit wary of it. But considering his success in New York and how well he's pitched this year, I can just envision him as the ideal 8th inning guy for Edwin Diaz. And again, because of the contract, I don't think that it's going to require a top 10 prospect to get a deal done. I don't know how much they need starting pitching in that system. I don't know if they love a Mike Vassell, but you could see a world where whichever one they like, a Vassell, Dom Hamill, Tyler Stewart, that might be the headlining piece in a trade like this, where again, you don't have to touch Brandon Sproat or Blade Tidwell. Some of the prospects that you want to hang on to, Jonah Tong. We'll probably do that as a show, by the way, leading up to the deadline. Who are the untouchables in the Mets system, at least in my eyes? So stay tuned for that one. But Chad Green, because of the contract, makes a lot of sense for the Mets. Now, the Blue Jays aren't a team that need to get off of money, but getting off a lot of money for a reliever, if one of his 2 seasons you're not going to be in the playoffs, I think it makes a lot of sense that he would get dealt. Beyond that, Yimi Garcia, or excuse me, I think it's Himi. It's spelled YMI, but I'm pretty sure I had a Blue Jays guy tell me just recently it's Jimmy. It might be Jimmy. We'll just call him Garcia. I apologize for butchering that name. But Garcia is pitching to a 2.57 ERA this year with a great strikeout rate, 11.89 strikeouts per 9. Underlying numbers are very strong with Garcia. Has a 2.32 expected ERA compared to a 2.57 actual ERA. Fastball sitting 96, 97 miles per hour. He has held opposing hitters to a 116 batting average against his fastball with a whiff rate over 35% on a fastball. That's going to play. The problem is he's a rental. And I am pretty opposed to trading for a rental reliever because you pretty much have to win the World Series to win that trade. Or at least make a really deep run. But you're going to lose that trade. Yeah, sure, maybe you resign him in the offseason, but you can just sign him outright when he hits free agency. I like Garcia if he's attached to Chad Green. If you're getting 2 for 1, then I would be okay with the prospect capital it would take to get Garcia. Otherwise, I think the Mets would stay away, but you never really know. Now, Trevor Richards is a third pitcher that fits a similar billing as far as being a rental reliever who could be on the market. Not nearly as attractive as Garcia. He has a 3.62 ERA and nearly 50 innings pitched. So you look at that and you say, all right, that's dependable. It's not elite. It's very similar to a Phil Maton. He's more of a workhorse than Garcia. Garcia did deal with an injury this year, but he's, I think, less than 30 innings pitched. Meanwhile, Richards, like I said, nearly 50 innings pitched. You could see him also getting multiple innings potentially at times. So I could see him being a really nice fit where it wouldn't really break the bank to get him. Could just be a pitcher the Mets target on his own without having to give up too much prospect capital on a rental. And I will concede on that. If you're giving up, someone at the back end of your top 30 or outside of your top 30 altogether, a low-level prospect you've barely started to develop for a rental reliever, I'm more okay with it. It's just trading someone from your top 15 prospects potentially for a guy like Garcia. That's where I'm a little more hesitant. And I think he'd have a lot of suitors at this year's deadline. So That's the Blue Jays for you. Let's move over to the National League with the Washington Nationals. And they have maybe the best possible option for the Mets when it just comes to stuff with control. That's Kyle Finnegan. Their closer has been lights out this year. You could have made the case that he should have been an all-star. Really has been lights out since debuting with the Nationals in 2020. He just missed the championship, but he has been a steady bullpen arm ever since his debut. Has never finished with an ERA over 4 in any of the seasons of his career. He's 32 years old, has a 2.45 ERA this year and 40 in the third innings pitched, 25 saves in 29 attempts, all while holding a whip of 1.02, which is really good. Got electric stuff. Finnegan and Diaz for the next year and a half would be something to behold. It's going to cost a lot, though, to get him because Kyle Finnegan, he has control with the closer potential. So when teams are looking for closers at this year's deadline, you got Kyle Finnegan, you got Tanner Scott, you got Carlos Estevez. Those are the three. And Jason Foley is a fringe one as well, but we don't even know if he's going to be on the market, and he's got a lot of control. Finnegan is the only one of those three between Scott and Estevez that has control for next year. Those other two guys are rentals. So I think he's going to cost more than anybody outside of Mason Miller, who probably doesn't get dealt anyway at this year's trade deadline when it comes to the relievers. It's not going to be cheap. So you might have to give up a top 10 prospect in the system to get a Kyle Finnegan. Now, who that guy is, I don't really know. I just can't see a world where you trade a Ryan Clifford for a reliever. And it's pretty much that way with almost all of those guys that you go through. Or maybe it has to be two guys that are just outside the top 10, but inside the top 15. Like that might be the trade. And it might take 3 prospects to get a Kyle Finnegan if you don't want to give up that blue chip guy. Maybe you can get a second reliever in the deal to make it a little bit more palatable. So Dylan Floro is going to be a free agent after this season. He's been great this year, 2.11 ERA, 47 innings pitched. Derek Law is another workhorse, 56 and 2/3 innings pitched this year, 3.18 ERA. He's got an extra year of control as well. So if you could pull off a deal for Finnegan and Law, and you just get 2 arms for your bullpen for not just this season, but next season, that makes that prospect capital a little bit easier to swallow that you're going to have to give up to get that deal done. Ultimately, as much as the Nationals are an ideal fit if you are shopping for relief help, that's why I spotlighted them in the article and obviously on the show today. I can't necessarily see these two teams coming together on a trade. I think the cost is going to get a little bit too high. And I don't think that that's an issue for David Stearns to not want to shop in that market. Because as good as this team has been, they're going to have to be carried by their bats and their rotation, especially with the addition of Kodai Senga. That's what's going to take them to a playoff spot, really. And yes, getting Kyle Finnegan in your bullpen would be massive. But the teams that are going to be willing to really pay for him know that they're going to be in October. They know that they're going to pair Craig Kimbrell with Kyle Finnegan if you're the Orioles, or if you're the Yankees, Holmes and Finnegan. If you're the Phillies, just adding another stud into a really good bullpen. The Braves, same thing. So those teams that have the certainty of October, the Dodgers are another one, quite honestly. It's a little bit easier to say, I'm going to give up a prospect that I really don't want to trade because you know that Finnegan could be pitching a really big spot for you in October. The Mets can still fall out of this race. And so I think because of that, you've got to be cautious about what you trade for a reliever at this deadline, even one that does come with a little bit more control. And again, that's where I think the Mets, if they are going to shop for a top-end guy, I think it would be one that at least you have for next year, where if it doesn't work out this season, you can at least hold your hat on, all right, we're going to try again in 25. That brings me to the Marlins with Tanner Scott. But before we talk about the all-star closer, another quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. The Mets going to Miami this weekend. You can travel there. And again, I'll be there on Friday night. So if you want to say hello at a game, you can do so. And you can find the right state that can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even Miami. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays, Prize Picks is there for you. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Let's move over to the Miami Marlins. Tanner Scott is going to be one of the best relievers traded at this year's deadline. He might just be, based on the stats alone, the best reliever dealt. He has a 1.34 ERA right now in 40 and a third innings pitched. He was an all-star. He's saved 14 of 16 chances for the Marlins. Doesn't get a lot of those opportunities this year, but he's been good when he has had a chance. And he's 29 years old, left-handed pitcher, and lefties are batting .083 against him, while righties aren't doing much better at a 153 batting average against. So disgusting stuff. A guy that should get a ton of value as a rental reliever. You do have that caveat of him being a rental. So how much does he really cost you? I'm not entirely sure, but could he get a top 10 prospect in the system? Potentially. And even if not, if the Orioles are entertaining Tanner Scott and they can trade their 15th best prospect, that prospect is going to be significantly more valuable than the 15th best prospect on the Mets. And they have depth to be able to put together a couple different pieces that the Marlins would love. If they could get Connor Norby for Tanner Scott, Norby being a guy that would slot into the Marlins infield tomorrow and could be there for the next 6 years, that's a no-brainer. And the Mets just don't have that piece. So I can't really envision Tanner Scott coming to the Mets, and I don't think they should buy a rental closer where the price is so much more beyond what his value truly is, where he's given the Marlins no value after this deadline. That's why they're trading him. For the Mets, yes, he would provide a ton of value, and he could just be the piece that swings the balance this year, but he also can be amazing, and other pieces around him aren't, and all of a sudden you just traded a prospect that you really like to get a guy in Tanner Scott that just will be gone. And like, let's just say you trade Blade Tidwell to get Tanner Scott, and Blade Tidwell is in your division as a starting pitcher for 5+ years. It's going to hurt a lot. So as much as Tanner Scott deserves mentioning, I just can't see a deal getting done. Instead, though, there's another lefty on the Marlins that I would be trying to get, and that is AJ Puk, who, as I went through the exercise of writing this article, AJ Puk became my favorite reliever that the Mets could target, not just because of the stuff, which can be dominant, but it's everything about AJ Puk that just feels like a very under-the-radar David Stearns type move. So this year, you look at AJ Puk, 4.73 ERA. That's bad, right? Well, he was a starting pitcher to open up this season. They tried to convert him. It was a failed experiment. 4 starts, he gave up 14 runs in 13 and 2/3 innings pitched. ERA over 9. So you look at every single thing he's done since then, and it's been watered down by this horrible run as a starting pitcher for the first month of the season. Since going back to his comfortable bullpen role, he has a 2.39 ERA across 26 and a third innings pitched. So we're looking at value, right? You have Tanner Scott, big name, all-star, closer, all these things that are going to drive up the value. You have AJ Puk, who has a 2.39 ERA as a reliever this year. But that ERA as a starter inflates his numbers where he goes under the radar. Plus, there's control here. Okay, he's under control through 2026. This is a guy, if you haven't seen him before, he's 6'7", so he's a towering lefty. There's been times where he has struck out a ton of batters. Last year, I believe the strikeout rate was over 30%. This year, strikeouts are down. I'm not sure how much the starting pitching has watered those numbers down as well. I'd assume that it really has. But while I love Puck as a fit for the Mets, more than, like I said, most of the relievers we've talked about today, there's 2 options left on him. He has 2 more option years. So what that means is you just acquired Matt Gage and Alex Young off of waivers. If one of those guys is pitching better in the minor leagues, you can go to them and you can option AJ Puck down for the year and still have a ball of clay that's 6'7" with nasty stuff that you can work on. And next year he could be the setup man or a lights out left-handed reliever. AJ Puck is a really underrated trade target for the Mets. And if they're able to get a dependable setup man, let's just say you get Chad Green or you get Jason Foley or you get Jimmy Garcia, whatever it is. I'm stumbling over it every time, man. You see the Y and you just don't think Jimmy. But if you were to get whatever right-handed reliever that's out there, even if you swung the blockbuster for Finnegan or you got Dylan Floro or Derek Law, whatever it is, you get a dependable righty, you get Puck as this high upside lefty, that pairing might not break the bank on prospects and could fill your needs this season. Plus, Puck gives you upside beyond this year. So if the Marlins are just open for business, which they should be, and they're looking at AJ Puck and they're saying, yeah, he's good, but if we can get a prospect we like, we'll pull the trigger. Maybe that's a piece that the Mets try to swing a deal for here. Last team, the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, this is some luxury shopping. The Mets got the affordable reliever in Phil Maton. I don't think any of these 3 guys are going to come as cheap because Maton, it was just player to be named later or cash, and I still don't think I've seen a report that tells us exactly what it was. But Pete Fairbanks and Jason Adam are the 2 that scream out as really good fits. Colin Poche is another one. We'll get to him at the end. Fairbanks has been one of the most dominant relievers in baseball. I mean, there's been seasons where he has struck out over 14 batters per 9. That's how good he's been. He is an eccentric personality that would be an immediate fan favorite in New York. And he is on one of these contracts that the Rays signed to trade. And what I mean by that is he's got a 3-year, $12 million deal. Very affordable. There's a club option on that with a $7 million kicker with $1 million buyout. So from Fairbanks' perspective, it's really 3 for 11 with the buyout factored in. He has $4 million in average annual value that started in 2023, goes through 2025. I promise you this, Pete Fairbanks will not be pitching for the Tampa Bay Rays in 2026. He won't. They'll pick up that option. They'll trade him that offseason. They have multiple windows to try to trade him, and that's why I don't think this would get done, because they could trade him now. They could trade him in the offseason. They could trade him at next year's deadline, or they could trade him at the following offseason, and they're going to be competing all the way along the way. They're 500 right now, so they don't have to trade Pete Fairbanks. But if they're putting him on the table and you can get a deal done, if the package to get Kyle Finnegan is the same to get Fairbanks, I'd prefer Fairbanks because you get an extra year of control, and he just has a little bit more to him when it comes to dominance when he's at his absolute best. This has been a sort of a bad year for him, and yet he has bounced back to really, I mean, his ERA is in the low 3s, and at one point, I think it was like over 9. I mean, early in the season, it was a disaster. He has settled in. Pete Fairbanks, if he's on the table and you're going to swing a trade for a Finnegan or a Carlos Estevez or a Tanner Scott, one of these high-priced relievers on the market, make sure that you at least check in with Tampa first, because if you have to throw even a little bit more in for Fairbanks for the extra year control, I would do that. Beyond him, Jason Adam, maybe even better this year, 1.67 ERA. He has been so good. That's in 43 innings pitched. In 2022, he finished with an ERA sub-2 as well. Last year, sub-3 ERA. This guy just consistently is one of the best relievers in baseball. And you have 2 years of arbitration beyond this season. Again, that's why the Rays don't have to deal him. But if they have a bad next week and a half and they say, you know what, let's take advantage, let's sell, and you can get one of these guys, they would not only be good for this year, but for a couple years beyond it. That's the type of trade where I'm a lot more willing to see the Mets give up one of their more blue chip prospects. Again, we got to figure out what that looks like. Would you trade Brett Beatty for Pete Fairbanks? It's interesting. I wouldn't say no right off the bat, which is crazy because it's so much control on Beatty. But that just shows you what a Fairbanks could do for you in the stretch run where I ponder it, right? The last one's the most attainable arm, Colin Poche, 3.24 ERA this year in 25 innings. He's a left-handed pitcher. He's only under team control for 1 year beyond this season. That's why he's more attainable and doesn't have quite the same career track record as Fairbanks or Adam. I could see this trade happening where it doesn't cost a ton. I'm sure there's some prospects in the Mets system that are lower down that the Rays love. Probably a teenager that might come back to haunt you. But you know what? If you can get a guy that solves your need as a left-handed reliever and helps you make the playoffs this year for someone you haven't even really started developing yet, you might want to make that move. So definitely an option for the Mets. Now, I've already gone pretty long on the show today, but I have other names to watch that we're not going to get into really at length, but you have a list of 9 other guys that I put in the article here as just bullet points. Watch out for them. So we'll start with the Rangers, David Robertson and Kirby Yates. I don't know if I see them, as sellers at the deadline because they're defending champs. I think they'd like to hang in this race. They played a little bit better baseball as of late. They don't have to deal, but if they do, they have so much pitching. They could absolutely refurbish that farm system for years ahead where they should still be competitive. I think they should sell. And if they do, Robertson and Yates would absolutely be atop the Mets list of guys to target. Robertson, I think you could have him for next year too. I have to look into his contract. Maybe if the Rangers fall out of this a little more, we'll do a show on it. Yates has been ridiculously good as their closer. Would probably cost a lot to get him. I think he is a rental, though. Jose Reyna is another name that's been really good for them this year as a reliever. You might remember him as a guy that gave up a ton of home runs as a Marlins starting pitcher, but now getting a second life as a reliever, and he has thrown the ball very well. Angels, you have Carlos Estevez, who we've already briefly mentioned throughout the show today, and Hunter Strickland, who's been very good this year. The White Sox, Michael Kopech will be dangled, a guy that can throw 102, but has really bad results this season. I'd stay away from the Mets, but if he's not going to cost much to acquire, I get a flyer. I just think you want dependability at this deadline, not just upside. Wait for Shintaro Fujinami to give you that upside that Kopech's going to give you. I don't think it makes sense. You have Aroldis Chapman, where I don't want to see the Mets trade for Aroldis Chapman, but I mentioned him in the article as a name to watch. And then the Reds have a ton of relief help that could intrigue the Mets. Nick Martinez, a guy that has been great whenever he's pitching out of the bullpen, but has been a swingman doing both the last couple of years with the Padres first, now with the Reds, on an expensive contract that they'd probably be very willing to clear if they were out of it. So that's why he was interesting. And Justin Wilson coming back to the Mets had some success in the past. What was that, 21? Towards 2019? It might have been even longer ago. But Justin Wilson was once very good in a Mets uniform, having a nice season with the Reds. He's another name. Brent Suter's there. I mean, they have a ton of good relievers. Buck Farmer. They got a lot. So if the Reds are sellers, that's a team to watch. I didn't spotlight them as much because I don't think they're going to sell. I think they're going to try to just ride this season out and see what they can do in a wild card race that's still admittedly pretty wide open. And if they have some things that go their way, if Noelvi Marte can start hitting after suspension, Ellie De La Cruz can put up MVP numbers for a couple months easily, and you have a really good top 3 in that rotation with Lodolo, Green, and Andrew Abbott. I don't know if they sell. So that is your complete overview of relievers who could be on the move at this year's deadline. I'll put up a poll on YouTube today of some of the different relievers that I mentioned, see which one you guys think is your favorite. And we will continue to talk about these teams in passing, at least, as we lead into the deadline. Tomorrow's show is going to focus on the second half here, and particularly the stretch run, the final test before the deadline. The Mets got to ace it. Otherwise, they could still go the other direction, although I think that's unlikely. I think it's either stand pat or conservatively buy, but they got to do well to keep this thing up. So we'll be previewing what lies ahead against the Marlins, this stretch of games before the deadline, all that good stuff, and covering everything deadline related throughout the remainder of this month. I appreciate all of you who continue to tune in every day. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The new goal is to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers absolutely everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with your local experts from each team and your league-wide experts from each league. By Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.